everyone, this is Carbonite, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Skyruler deck list. Alright, so Skyruler as a deck is pretty interesting. As opposed to some other Stoicheia bosses, it doesn't really require very much engine requirement, so you can splash a lot of non-engine into the deck. It's fairly generic, and there's quite a few different ways to play it. I've seen a lot of people going the balls to the walls builds with no PGs, no heals. Personally, I don't think that build is that good. And I would rather just play it like a normal deck, and it still does a solid job of that. But as far as being like a solid deck to bring to regionals, this is definitely a deck that is just for your locals. It's a lot of fun to play, but you know, you'll probably just steal a couple of games. But with that out of the way, let's go and hop straight into the deck profile. Right, so starting off where we always do, of course, with the ride line. Of course, you have your generic D starter. It can be anything you want. The grade 1, when it is ridden over by the grade 2, you may discard a card, and technically, as long as you're playing Skyruler, there's a lot of effects that are going to be, say, reveal Skyruler, or if you have a Skyruler vanguard. I'm just going to refer to that as if you are playing Skyruler, because obviously that's what's going to be happening. So you discard a card, search for your deck for any grade 1 or less card without Sentinel and 6k power or less, and you may call it. When we get into the main deck, we'll talk about what the main call target is for that. We do play an alternative call target just in case something happens. But like I said, we'll talk more about that once we get into the main deck and actually go over that card. But just know that this skill is kind of what lets your engine start going. And then, of course, the grade 2, when he is ridden over by the grade 3, you may Soul Blast 1, check top 5, and then discard 1. Then you can choose a grade 2 or greater card from your drop and add it to your hand. Now, quick note for this, I would always Soul Blast him out. Just in case you whiff on the top 5 to find a grade 2. We're not actually playing that many grade 2s, so you always want to be able to at least add something back off the skill. There is one really good target to add off of this. It effectively kind of in pseudo searches it. We'll talk about that once we get into the main deck, of course. And then, of course, the other main target that I do have for this is the Persona Ride. Like sometimes I'll pitch a Persona Ride for Ride and then just, add it back off of this. Now, getting into the main man himself, we do have a Skyruler. So during your turn, as long as your drop has 10 or more cards, he gets an extra +5. But if you do reach 20 or more cards in the drop zone, he gets an extra 15k instead, assuming that your opponent is... Actually, that's not even restricted to your opponent being grade 3. He just gets +15. But most of the time, you're going to have to wait till like turn 4 in order to get to 20. So, yeah. Now, he has 2 skills. The first is an act. CB1, you can check top 2 cards of your deck, choose a card among them, add it to your hand, and then you discard the rest, so helping you mill them and getting you a little bit of a plus. I'll be honest, I sometimes forget about that skill, just because, sometimes you don't always have the CB for it. You kind of want to sink your CB into other stuff, especially since his other skill also costs CB. So at the end of the round, he attacks a Vanguard CB1, and then you perform the following. You either stand all of your regards in a single column, or if your opponent is on grade 3 and you have 15 or more cards in your drop, you stand all of your rear guards, including, his booster, but that doesn't really matter. So like I said, this deck is very generic. He doesn't require any specific rear guards. You don't need to meet like an attack threshold. You don't need to... play specific cards to make him work. You basically just play anything in this deck. So it tends to be pretty flexible. All right, so moving on into the main deck, I'm going to be starting off with just 3 copies of Persona Ride. Now, of course, some builds don't even play Persona Ride, like the ones that are just all balls to the wall kill as quickly as possible. But I like playing Persona Ride. You mostly only Persona Ride once in this deck because you go turn 4 and kill them, or if you don't kill them, you just die the next turn. Although sometimes you don't. But basically, the main reason we're playing 3 Persona Rides is just so we can see it, because Persona Ride is really, really powerful, especially once you hit turn 4 and you have that 15 drop setup. You're swinging 5 times under Persona Ride, and your numbers can tend to get pretty big. So, obviously, Persona Ride just helps you get that extra little bit of push that you need to finish out the game. Now, the only other grade 3 I'm playing is the Fire Regalis. Obviously, we're going to be milling a lot in this deck, and you want to have cards that are really good to be milled. So obviously, Fire Regalis is very good in that sense. It also helps you deck thin. The one negative about this card is that it does take a card out of your drop. So be mindful of that when you're trying to get to 20 or 15. More realistically, you'd probably just want to get to 15 so you get the full restand. You don't really care about the extra 10k on the Vanguard. But yeah, just a solid card. And we do actually have a way of pseudo searching it. And it just works so well with the game plan that we have built for this deck. Right, so moving on into the grade 2s, our main triple rare is the Thruster Vixen. Now, she is one of our main beaters. Once we get to our turn forward, we probably want a front row of just these two, which is pretty easy to do considering that when she is placed on rear, other than by a unit card's ability, you can retire another rear guard with a different card name than her, so something else, and then you search your deck or drop for a unit with the same card name as her, and then you call it, and then if you search deck, obviously just shuffle it. But the main skill is that at the beginning of your battle phase, if you are on Skyruler, you may discard the top card of your deck, and then until your the end of your opponent's turn, she gets +5/+5, and then if you are at 15, she gets another +5/+5, so she gets +10/+10. Obviously that just means to shield and to power, so that puts her at 20k base if you're at that 15. Under Persona Ride makes her 30k base. With the booster behind her is going to be at least at 18 probably, or 8 or 18, making your numbers 38. Which is pretty powerful, especially when swinging twice. And then again, of course, retiring fills up your drop zone, and also, you know, deck thinning, making it easier to hit triggers. Now, I'm only at 3 copies of her. I know most people tend to play 4 or none at all, but I found that you realistically only really want to be using her skill on that turn 4. Like, you have other rear guards that you want to be putting in the front row before that, and just having it at 3 means that you're probably going to see it a little bit later. And since you can always just call copy from drop, you really don't need more than 3. I've found. Yeah, I've never really wanted the 4th copy, and it like searches itself out anyway. So it's just like, it's fine at 3, in my opinion. All right, moving on to a little bit of a spicy-ish tech. I'm actually playing 3 copies of Shadow Cloak. Now, Shadow Cloak here is obviously when he's placed on rear from hand. Search your deck for an order card, reveal it, and then if you don't have an order card with the same name there, just send it to the drop zone. So this is good for multiple reasons. Obviously, what we just talked about, this is the card that has extra synergy with Fire Regardless. If you're looking to build a board, you just call Shadow Cloak, mill the Fire Regardless, use Fire Regardless, and then of course you could still play an order that turn. But the main reason is that this deck is very reliant on one specific order. Obviously, that order is not searchable, meaning that, you know, if you see it, you're like, oh gosh, I'm going to slap my opponent so hard. But if you don't see it, then you're kind of like, oh, okay, these numbers are guardable. So obviously, Shadow Cloak is a way to pseudo search it out, just because we do play a lot of ways to get orders back from the drop, pretty much maxing out the way to get orders back. So Shadow Cloak, being able to mill them, kind of just guarantees our ability to access them every single turn. And then his other skill does actually come up a lot in this deck. Like I said, when we're talking about the ride line, Soul Blasting is very good because it fills up your drop. When you play an order card, you can Soul Blast 1, give him 5k. Makes numbers a little bit better, and more importantly, it Soul Blasts, and obviously every turn you're going to try to play an order, so that skill will be live. Now, speaking of ways to get orders back, we are actually going to be maxing out 4 copies of the Aspheronian Saphira. Obviously, this is the Keter Stoicheia Dual Nation card. When it's placed on rear, check top card of the deck. You may discard it if you'd like. Obviously, another card that helps contribute to our drop zone being as big as possible. But the main skill is that after that, you can CB1 to either choose a normal order from your drop, add it to your hand, or choose a grade 2 or greater card from a drop and call it to rear guard. Now, most of the time, you're not going to be using that, just because you don't really have any good call targets. Like, you can call a Persona Ride, I guess, but both of these skills, both of the other 2 grade 2 rear guards do not proc off of her, because this needs to be placed other than by unit card's ability, and this needs to be placed from hand. So most of the time, you're not going to be using that second skill. Her main purpose is to just get an order back, preferably one that you maybe milled off Shadow Cloak. So if you like see Shadow Cloak and this, you call the Shadow Cloak, mill the order that you need, and then just call, add the order that you just milled. So like I said, pseudo searching out your orders. One thing I forgot to mention about Shadow Cloak is obviously we're trying to get to as many cards in drop, so selective milling is just always really good when you're trying to get as many cards in drop as possible. And this card is the one that I mentioned is probably your best add target off of the ride line. This and this are probably like the best ones because it adds it to your hand, meaning that you can use both their skills, considering they are both they both need to be placed from hand. All right, so moving on into the grade ones, we get into our main playmaker, that being the follower rabbits. Now, follower rabbits has a lot of text on it, but I'll go ahead and just simplify it for you. So when he is placed on rear, you may discard the top card of your deck. I'll be honest, most of the time I don't do that, just because I find myself hitting 15 like fairly consistently, even without that skill. But it is there in case you want to try and accelerate yourself to that 20. I personally just don't like random milling, so that's why I typically don't do that. So that's just the first part of his skill. The other part of the skill is that when he is, so after you decide whether or not you want to discard a card, if you are playing Skyruler, you may discard a card to call another copy of the follower rabbits. Now if you add CB1 to that cost, you can actually call 3 instead of 1. So this is a huge paragraph, and that's basically what it says. On place, you may mill the top card of your deck. Then if you're playing Skyruler, either discard a card to call another copy, or CB1 and discard a card in order to call 3 copies instead. It's a lot of text, but that's basically what it does. So you call out this guy, and then you get a whole bunch of them. You basically just fill up your board with it on turn 2. Now, of course, he does actually have another skill, which is just the Kant, that he gets plus 1k for for every copy on the board, meaning that once you get all 4 on board, they're getting plus 4. They are a 5k base, meaning that they are at 9k base, which makes very good magic numbers most of the time, because 9 plus 9 is 18, which is hitting for even good numbers against a grade 3. But typically what will happen is I will try and have a full back row of just the follower rabbits, and then everything else is just, front row attackers. With only 3, they are 8k, which is perfectly fine, which scales in, very well with the 10k grade 2s and the other grade 1 that we're playing, which is technically also a 10k. So this is our main playmaker, right? So continuing on with the order retrieval is the 4 copies of Alvina. This is our main source of energy usage. Obviously, when she's placed on rear, of course, being a Stoichea card, it has to be from hand, EB3, and perform one of the following. Choose an order card without Regalis piece added to your hand, or choose grade 1 or less unit card from your drop and call it to rear. So obviously, Rabbit is also a call target. There's one other call target that we do have, but the main reason we're using her is to just add back the order. Basically, if you see Shadow Cloak plus this, you're going to be milling an order and then just straight up adding it back, and the order you're going to be using is going to be benefiting your 4 follower rabbits and making basically near unguardable turns, especially in the early game. But yeah, she's just here to be another copy of the order fetcher, and then obviously, being a 10k, she scales very nicely with a full back row of rabbits being 8k. All right, so moving on to our next grade 1. Sometimes people will be dicks and they will damage deny you on grade 1. They'll just not swing. So we need to have some sort of countermeasure, because we don't want to be calling a follower rabbit and then just not using its skills. So we're playing 2 copies of burrow mushrooms just in case that does happen. Obviously, being a 6k, you can call it out. You call it and then put it to soul, get 2 plant tokens. That's what it does. But, obviously that's not as powerful as a follow rabbits. You're not deck thinning 3. I did forget to mention that he can call from deck or drop. But, hopefully that's self-explanatory. But this is just in here in case you get damage denied. I guess it gives you soul, but like I said, the deck doesn't really go through soul. But, getting 2 plant tokens in the early game is very nice. Lets you hit good numbers. All right. So finishing off the grade 1 stuff, I'm actually playing a couple of 1-ofs. I am playing the In the Dim Darkness, the Frozen Resentment. This is the play with Soul Blast 1, check top 3, mill 1, choose a card with grade equal to your vanguard or less and call it. Obviously milling, great. Calling back is also pretty solid. You can get back follower rabbits if they all get like yeeted off the board, and then you can just recall them all again with another CB. But the main thing that I like this with is I saw someone doing this with their Skyruler build. The primary use for this, I think, is I typically like calling the Thruster Vixen out, because Thruster Vixen only just needs to be not called by a unit card's ability. If you call her with an order card, then you still are able to proc her skill, which is why if I see these in the early game, I'll tend to just pitch them and then hopefully draw into the Dim Darkness in order to revive it. But of course, being another order that you can mill off Shadow Cloak, and obviously we're playing the Alvina and the and the Saphira, so we have access to getting this back pretty much anytime. Now, another one of order that I am going to be playing is I'm going to be playing some silver white. For every grade 1, you choose one of your guards, it gets plus 5k. Obviously, one of your ideal boards in the early game is, you know, full board of just 5k, so you just give some of grade 1, so you just give something either 20 or 25k. Typically it'll be like the 4 rabbits and then either grade 2 or a Nalvina, so you know, you just pump something up really hard. This is really only useful if you're on your first grade 3 turn. Obviously it does in a pinch. It's another card that just gives power. Obviously there's one that we would prefer to have, but this one does in a pinch. But this is probably just better when you are going first and you don't have the full 15 to restand the whole board. You just stack this on top of one of the rear guards, and then you're going to swing with big massive number, and then you're going to restand and swing with that big massive number again. But you know, main reason why we're playing just one copy is the Shadow Cloak, so that we can have more cards to mill, so that Shadow Cloak is never dead. Now, the real main playmaker of the deck is, of course, going to be the 4 copies of the Blessing to the Flower Buds. This is all your rear guards with 5k or less power get an extra 10k, and they also get a skill that I sometimes forget. If their attack hits, you can actually bounce them back to your hand. So obviously, you're trying to mill this as quickly as possible with Shadow Cloak, and then just add it back, or draw into it, play it, and then add it back again every single turn with the Order Recyclers. Obviously, I did mention the rabbits. Each are at 5k, so playing this when you have the full board of them pumps them up to base 15k. With their skill, they get an extra 4k, and making them 19. So 19 plus 19 makes 38 on turn 2, and then it makes your vanguard into 29. And then, of course, the other rear guard can also be 29, assuming it's boosting a 10k. So just makes really big numbers for no reason. Obviously, this is the card you want to be playing on your kill turn with a full back row of rabbits, because now you have 18k boosters, and you're just smacking them really hard. All right, so just finishing off with the basic stuff. Of course, we do have the 4 PGs. Play Elementaria if you care about this deck. Obviously, if you're playing like Constructed Cup like I was, play Elementaria because Minerva is a thing. For our trigger lineup, we are just playing the 4 8 crit. Not playing any Solin crits just because, you know, sometimes you might need to call them out, and you'd rather have just like 5k. It's just going to scale better. For our 3 of, we are, of course, just going to be playing fronts. This is a kill as quickly as possible. And, of course, you are milling yourself a lot in this deck, so you probably don't want to be playing draws. I mean, I guess you could, because you tend to discard a lot in this deck. And also, like, you don't really have that big of a hand. And, you know, drawing more cards means that you can use more cards and fill up your drop zone even faster. But like I said, you typically don't have an issue with filling up your drop zone. Like, most of the time you tend to get to 15 just from doing your normal plays and through your guarding of your opponent's turn. So, you know, it's usually not that big of a deal. And then, of course, for my heals, I'm going to be playing 2 regular heals and 2 counter-attack heals. This meta is very rife with multi-attack, specifically restanding multi-attack. So playing the counter-attack heals is pretty good this format, which is why I have them here. And then, of course, for my OT, I'm just going to be playing Blessed Favor. As I always say in the deck profiles, Blessed Favor is just generically good in pretty much any deck. You have to have a pretty good reason to be playing anything other than Blessed Favor. All right, so that's going to do it for my Skyruler deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.